The Midnight Firecrackers, a story of the Tet Offensive. In the city of Hue, the air was filled with the scent of incense and the sound of laughter. It was late January 1968, the time of Tet, the Vietnamese Lunar New Year. 12-year-old Vinh and his older sister Lu were busy hanging bright red banners across their doorway. For centuries, Tet had been a time of truce, when everyone put down their tools and weapons to celebrate family and the coming spring. "This year will be the best one yet," Vinh said, adjusting a paper lantern. As the clock struck midnight on January 30th, the sky exploded with light. At first, Vinh and Lu thought it was the usual fireworks, but the sounds were too deep, too sharp. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble. Across South Vietnam, from the mountain villages to the busy streets of Saigon, thousands of North Vietnamese and Viet Cong soldiers had launched a massive, coordinated surprise attack. The holiday truce had been broken, and the Tet Offensive had begun. Miles away in the city of Saigon, a young American soldier named Hayes crouched behind a concrete wall near the U.S. Embassy. He and his fellow soldier Brooks were stunned. They had been told the war was winding down, but now the fighting was right at their doorstep. "We weren't expecting this," Brooks shouted over the roar of sirens. The attack on the embassy was a shock to the world, proving that no place was truly safe. Back in Hue, the situation grew dire. The ancient citadel, a fortress of history and culture, became a battlefield. Vinh and Lu had to leave their home as the sounds of whistles and heavy boots filled their street. They darted through narrow alleys, the air thick with gray smoke and the smell of gunpowder. "Stay close to me, Vinh," Lu urged, her voice trembling but her grip on his hand firm. During their escape, they ducked into the doorway of an old shop. Suddenly, a figure appeared from the shadows. It was Hayes, whose unit had been sent north to help retake the city. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Vinh looked at the exhausted soldier, and Hayes looked at the two frightened children. There was no anger between them, only the shared fear of a world turned upside down. Hayes signaled for them to stay low and pointed toward a safe path. While the fighting raged, something new was happening. For the first time, television cameras were everywhere. A journalist named Sarah stood near Hayes, her camera crew filming the chaos of the streets. Back in the United States, families sat in their living rooms and saw the reality of the war on their screens. The optimistic reports they had heard from the government didn't match the images of the fierce battles in Saigon and Hue. The battle for Hue lasted for weeks, the longest and bloodiest of the offensive. Vinh and Lu found shelter in a cold, damp basement with other families. They shared small portions of rice and listened to the constant thunder of the big guns outside. "When the sun comes out, will the city still be there?" Vinh whispered. Lu didn't have an answer, but she held him close, providing the only warmth in the dark. As February came to an end, the military strength of the offensive began to wane. Hayes sat with his commander, Miller, looking at a map of the recaptured areas. While the U.S. and South Vietnamese forces had technically won the battles and pushed the attackers back, the cost had been enormous. Miller looked at a stack of newspapers from home. "The public doesn't see this as a victory," he said quietly. The credibility gap was widening. When the smoke finally cleared from Hue, Vinh and Lu emerged from their shelter. The beautiful city they knew was scarred. Walls were crumbled, and the majestic gates of the citadel were pockmarked by bullets. They walked toward the river, seeing the destruction but also seeing people starting to sweep the streets. The Tet Offensive had changed the course of the war, making many realize that a quick end was not in sight. Years later, history books would record 1968 as the turning point of the Vietnam War. For Vinh and Lu, it was the year they grew up too fast. They stood in their courtyard and planted a new apricot tree to replace the one lost in the fire. They knew that while boundaries and battles are what get drawn on maps, it is the resilience of people that truly defines history.